First of all, it was a dream and ambition of Ntozake's to bring it back to Broadway for the 45th anniversary. She was set on it. She worked very hard toward it before she passed away. And in fact, one of the things that was so amazing is that she had picked out Camille A. Brown to be involved in the production herself earlier on. Now, at the time, it was in regard to choreography, but she had pictured Camille as a rising star, rising talent, and wanted her involved in the production herself. So that was one of the neat things that has developed over time. Not only has Camille been involved, but now on Broadway, she's actually directing and choreographing and the choreographer for the new revival.
It was Aoife who turned Zake's attention to Camille Brown's work and said she's the person that would be that adds this extra component that we need to really emphasize the dance part of the choreo poem that For Colored Girls it is. So there's an interesting synergy that has consistently happened with the production. But I too am really excited. Like Paul's basically saying that, Zake would have been thrilled that this is happening. I'm also, personally, really, I'm thrilled because I have met women from other generations who say they performed the play in high school or in college, not so much high school, but in college. I've met so many Black and white women and brown women who said, we did this play, I did this, I was lit. And to see that it's going back to Broadway and to see if it will really have the same resonance now with even another generation of women is very exciting for me.
My other sister, Ifa Baesa, that Bisa mentioned, she was very much involved in the first production of For Colored Girls as well, helping to bring that along and turn it into a play as opposed to just a series of poems. So she was very instrumental with the first piece. And now I wasn't aware of her link to Camille, so thank you for sharing that. But she's been a part of this for its long journey as well.
Yeah. Well, there, number one, she's all over the internet, so they could always look up her name. But let me tell you, my sister, she was brilliant. She was, she had a great sense of humor. She was very forceful without being imposing. In other words, she sort of knew what she wanted, or she had a vision in her head about what she wanted, and she was going to do that. But she never went around trying to boss other people, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. She just sort of went toward her goals. And as one of her best friends said at her wedding, which for me made sense, but I had never thought of her that way, I guess because she was my sister. Tulani and Kavindi said, Zake, they went to college together, was always the smartest person in the room. So, and when coming of age when she did in the 60s and then going through the 70s, for a woman to hold that sort of status in a way without being haughty about it, just the clarity and the purposefulness of what she did, whether it was frivolous. My sister could be very frivolous on purpose. You know what I mean? So anyway, I think that's important to know about her. She was a very loving sister. I'll say that as a big sister. I don't know. What else would you add, Paul?
So let me give you my 2 cents on it. And it's funny, because so the hierarchy went Zake, Aoife, me, and then Bisa. And we were each 2 years apart. So we each experienced life a little bit differently. So And also, as the only boy in the family, I had a whole different, set of experiences with my sisters than they had with each other. But to answer your question, brilliant is the word that I think might first come to mind. But to really know and understand Zaki, it wasn't just her brilliance; it was her insightfulness. She had a tremendous insight into people and into circumstances. And that's one of the things I think that translates so well into her work. She's very insightful. Also, she was a walking encyclopedia. She read voraciously and studied all the time. She self-taught herself different languages, and so she could understand people from their own shoes, so to speak. And she seemingly did it effortlessly. That's what was so astounding. But I tell people, because people don't always appreciate the life of artists. She worked at her craft. She was a working artist. Mm-hmm. She would make time basically every day to work on her craft, to read, to study, to think. It was not some kind of, pastime. It was a passion, but it was also her application.
My dad was from New Jersey. He's from Lakewood, New Jersey. And he always knew he was going to come back to New Jersey. I mean, he went to Lincoln undergraduate in Pennsylvania, and then he went to Meharry. He did residency, and he did a lot of things. So we grew up partially in St. Louis. But when he brought us back to New Jersey, because I was just a baby, I didn't remember having been in New Jersey to start with. But we moved from St. Louis, Missouri, which is relatively urban, to what we call the sticks. We moved to Lawrence Township. It wasn't even called Lawrenceville then. It was Lawrence Township. And there was a cornfield in the back of our house. There were no sidewalks on the street. So our first, our adaptation to being back home for what Dad was back home was a little rough. And just to get used to, because we didn't have any friends immediately. We were integrating the school in Lawrence, and it was not that nice for me, at least. But my sister, all right, so she was a teen, and I remember very early, she said, "Mom, everybody here has a cousin. Don't we have a cousin? Don't we have any cousins? Are we related?" So Zaki found a person that was related on my dad's mother's side, who was a cousin in Lawrence Township. That was really funny. So what I'm trying to say about that is, going from place to place, Zaki always, as Paul was saying, not only was she insightful, but she tried to really become a member, like a part of a community that she was in, and wanted to immediately sort of find a way, what could she find in common? What could she share? Of course, there were some other Williamses there. We had some cousins that were like in Levittown and stuff, but they weren't close enough to where we immediately were. But at any rate, so I remember that about growing up in the area. And I just remember that my father was a very prominent physician. He was the only Black surgeon in the capital of the state. And he would drive around town and always sort of wave to everybody. Every time you pass a Black person, Dad would wave, they would wave back. It was like, I grew up thinking that everybody in Trenton knows my father. Well,
he's in a good time back then delivering everybody's babies. So,
right.
So even today, I run into people whose parents or somebody in their family was delivered by my dad. But as Lisa said, he was a general surgeon, so he did a lot of work in town, particularly with the Black community. But let me take you back a little bit, because Bisa was just born basically before we moved from Trenton to St. Louis, and then when we came back, we lived outside of Trenton. But our social setting was always Trenton. It wasn't Lawrence, because anyway, at least for me. Now, but I do remember a little bit about Trenton before we moved to St. Louis. We lived at 626 Perry Street in East Trenton. And my father, we had a house and he had his medical office was part of the house, and it was a very warm environment. My mom and dad would host parties, and we were a very social family.
Yeah.
We were a social activist family. We were a social partying family too. So we were very social. And that's where Zaki was the oldest of the bunch. So you did note, or somewhere along in our discussions, she did have interactions with some of these folks that came by, W.E.B. Du Bois, the musicians that my dad was into music and professional boxing. Those were his two big, and art. Huh? Right, and art. But he sort of did art by himself. But the music and the boxing, he involved other folks in and got to know a bunch of people. And through that, they would become friends, and we would host them at the house.
Right.
It was an interesting community, that's where we sort of bonded as a family. Then we moved to St. Louis, had a different kind of experience there, then moved back to New Jersey. I speak on that because I have really strong sense of the importance of Trenton in my development, because again, that was the center of my social development. So most of my friends were in the Trenton community. And when I was in high school, I spent a summer, again, back to East Trenton at the East Trenton Neighborhood Center. I forget what it was called exactly, but it was during the period of anti-poverty programs and everything. And there was a fella in East Trenton, a reverend pastor who had Pastor Sam, what's his name? Yeah.
Father Sam.
Father Sam, who was part of this East Trenton
Neighborhood Community Center. Yeah,
Neighborhood Community Center. And one summer, I worked there with my cousin, Khalid Lum, and among other things, or was Khalid working on that? I remember we put on a cultural festival one summer, and we may have done it for a couple of summers, but I know one summer we did it, and it was great. We brought some musicians from out of town, from in town. We held this thing on the lawn of City Hall or someplace where there's a lawn.
Wasn't there a civic center? There was a.
Anyway, no, it was a
Carver.
big lawn.
Wasn't Carver Center? No.
No, it was bigger than that. But in any event, we had a very successful kind of cultural Saturday afternoon with lots of different kinds of musicians and speakers, poets, and everything. And that summer, along with the other work that we did, helped me in my sense of development. And actually, my first job, now that I think about it, when I was in high school, my very first job, I think I had just turned 16, because I had to verify I was at least 16. I worked for, I think it was the city of Trenton or some agency, and we did a poll of the East Trenton community to try to understand we did a survey, try to understand what the community needs were in terms of their feelings about it. And I worked with this sister who was a sophomore in college, Iris Carter, who was the prettiest girl I knew at the time. So I had a good summer. But when we finished the poll, we wrote a nice little report and everything. And one of the key things that the poll said was that the folks wanted more recreational areas. They didn't have enough parks or basketball courts or places for kids to gather, for those kinds of outdoor activities. And we submitted the report. But the thing that kind of irked me, several years later, as the town went through transformation, they basically demolished the East Trenton neighborhood and put up the big police station that's probably still there now. I'm not sure if it's still there now or not. Yeah. But instead of looking at how to revitalize it, ultimately that community was was displaced.
It's a really interesting question. How does Trenton, what did I draw from Trenton in my career or in my adult life? And I'll say, both of our parents were civic activists. And one of the things my dad started was the Sunday Free Clinic. My father had always had this notion that nationalized medicine was important, but we didn't have that at that time. So he decided to open up what was called the Sunday Free Clinic. And I remember, to prepare it, he got the space, I'm not sure exactly from where, but it was near what was the old Trenton bus station. I don't even know what's there anymore, but it was on Perry Street.
North Clinton Avenue.
No, I mean, it was on, what was it?
You're talking about 208 North Clinton?
I don't know if it's Perry or North Clinton, but anyway, it's where the old bus station was. I guess I don't know. Because they sort of meet. But at any rate, what I'm trying to say is, to get it ready, I was with Dad as we were painting walls and doing everything before the actual grand opening of the Sunday Free Clinic. Then he had Sunday Free Clinic, and Dad called around to his colleagues, other doctors, to explain what he was doing. And none of the other doctors wanted to do that. They didn't want to give away their services for free. But he did get some nurses from Mercer Hospital and Hamilton Hospital that came and supported the Sunday Free Clinic. And it was, that's what it was. It was community service. It was free service. My father, very poor in Lakewood, and he felt that health services were a right. People that couldn't afford it. That didn't mean that they should be sick. They should. So I think that growing up in this environment where, yes, we were privileged. My parents were professionals. I understand that. But our economic status, our educational privileges didn't separate us from our fellow humanity, and particularly from other Black people. So I think that experience, that aspect of being in Trenton and always being around a very diverse mix of people with cultural interests, people from different economic backgrounds, but always trying to use whatever is the best in me to help somebody else. I think I got that from both my parents and from seeing that on display in Trenton, and understanding that you can do that and really be a member of the community. Like as Paul said, Trenton was our environment, was basically our social environment. And that was okay. We were full. We were well-rounded in that way, I think.
Let me add a couple of pieces of color for you, Ken, on that, because for me personally, later in my professional career, I became involved in politics in different kinds of ways, not to run for office, but to support the political arena and leadership in politics, because I learned in Trenton how important that was. Because along with the Sunday Free Clinic, my father was chair of the board of the first United Progress, UPI, United Progress Inc. He caught a lot of flack politically, and I could see as a young boy, as a teenager, I could see how that was playing out in the press, playing out on him personally, in terms of the kind of added layer of stress that he felt, because he felt he was trying to do the right thing, and there were people who were constantly trying to attack him. But for me, it was an education in the power of politics and how you leverage people to basically to take sides. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, again, I was much more socially involved in Trenton, so I just have to shout out to the Thetas that helped groom me to become the young man I became. But the Junior Thetas, or whatever we called ourselves at the time, was a great little social, I will call it a social group, and we had a great time dealing with all the fellows in the organization.
I don't know the answer to that because I haven't been back. It's interesting. I haven't been back to Trenton. I still have one aunt who lives there, whom I love dearly. Um, but I noticed like a lot of the people that I knew, yeah, our generation didn't stick.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of new people there.
Yeah, I don't.
And Trenton's changed, and change is a good thing. I understand, one of the problems in the town are these youth gangs, and that's a problem in every urban center. It's a peculiarly difficult problem to attack. But I think that the key for Trenton is focus on the youth, and help develop a cadre of young people that feel connected, that feel appreciated, that have an opportunity to grow and shine. We did something here in New York called the Eagle Academy for young men of color, where we created a novel public school model specifically for boys of color, because that's where a lot of the angst is, to help develop an educational model that would take them from where they were and bring them into a state of being community-minded, civic-minded, educated. Efforts like that, I think, are needed in not only in Trenton, but probably in most any urban center that we have in this country.
Yeah, can I just add on to that? Because speaking in general, my area of operation is the international field, but we are always working with other governments and other communities, talking about not just letting youth, having a focus on youth, but in empowering youth so that you're listening to them and implementing, doing some of the things they suggest. So it's one thing to say, okay, build a community center or have an extra ball court or something like that. But you've got to also listen to what they're asking for or what they're saying, and then help them to realize it. And it's that bridge building that'll help, I think, create a more stable and productive community.